In Money Watch, a rough day on the stock market. The Dow gave back early gains, finishing the day down just under 300 points. Experts say Wall Street is concerned the Fed could take more aggressive steps to fight inflation.
The S&P and NASDAQ also took a hit. The S&P is down more than 1%. The tech-heavy NASDAQ dropped more than 2%.
Christopher Mims is a technology columnist at the Wall Street Journal, and he joins us now for more on the impact supply chain disruptions are having on the global economy. Chris, welcome. Great to see you. So, of course, inflation is soaring and in turn causing severe disruptions to the U.S. supply chain. But it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg thing, right? Because these supply chain disruptions are only perpetuating inflation. So how are these rising costs impacting goods and services on every level? And is there any way to fix this cycle?
Yeah, you're absolutely right that a lot of these supply chain disruptions are driving these increased costs that we're seeing, whether it's at the pump or the grocery store or, online. Unfortunately, the fastest way to break this cycle is a recession. Short of that, a lot of supply chain managers are waiting for all the extra inventory that retailers bought, especially throughout the pandemic, to work its way through the system. There's a lot of congestion right now. It's like a giant traffic jam, really, as all that extra inventory that was purchased has to work through America's ports and then America's highways and then, through warehouses, which we are now at a record low for warehouse capacity in America. All of that inventory has arrived, and it's unclear whether or not consumers are going to buy it given increased prices.
Chris, where is the U.S. seeing the biggest issues with the supply chain?
Right now, the biggest issues are they're in ports because we have ongoing congestion there. But as I said, they're also in warehouses. We have less warehouse space available than ever. It's a lot of retailers taking up that warehouse space. Some people argue that maybe they overbought during the pandemic. Also, though, they learned a lesson during the pandemic, which is that they need to have extra inventory on hand if they're going to be able to stock shelves in the event that there are supply chain disruptions, which of course have been ongoing, right? There are still disruptions in production and in shipping out of China because, COVID is really taking off there right now.
Yeah. Well, speaking of China, I'm glad you brought it up because, of course, as you mentioned, it's grappling with its worst wave of COVID-19 since the start of the pandemic. Officials have locked down several of the country's largest cities in hopes of curbing the virus. So how exactly are these lockdowns in China impacting distribution on a global scale? And do you think the supply chain can bounce back without the support of China and Russia, bringing Russia into the conversation?
Yeah, China is the linchpin, of course, of global manufacturing. Even if things aren't made there, they contain components and materials which are made there. So, the shutdowns that we're seeing in China, even though they're trying to avoid them, they're having manufacturing workers actually sleep in the factories in which they're working to try to avoid shutdowns. Despite that, they're still having shutdowns with factories, with ports. So as that works its way through the global supply chain, it means a repeat of some of what we saw during the pandemic, where certain things are more expensive or they're simply unavailable. And again, every type of finished good you can name, it flows through China at some point, unless you're talking about, lumber or food. In terms of Russia, of course, the big impact there is increased fuel prices. Diesel's over $5 a gallon right now. A little over a year ago, it was $3 a gallon. So we're already seeing a potential slowdown in the rate at which folks are using truck transportation because it's simply becoming more expensive. In the long run, the danger there is a lot of the small owner-operators and the individual owner-operators could go bankrupt because of fuel costs if they can't raise prices on transportation fast enough. And that would further hurt, the capacity that we have available to move goods on America's highways.
So much going on. Christopher Mims, thanks so much for breaking it down for us.
Thank you for having me.